All right, guys, we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 5 tonight. We'll start at verses 1 through 11. And so if I was to give a title to this sermon, I would put a title of Entering the Deep Sea. Chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood at the lake of Gennesaret, and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answered and said unto him, Master, we have toiled all night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. Verse 8, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. You see, when I was growing up, I grew up near Atlanta. One of my favorite things to do was go fishing. And we would fish at Lake Oconee, which is about an hour from here on 20 West. It's about the same size as Clark Hills. Anyway, we'd go get some worms. We'd get out on the boat, and sometimes we would fish all night long. But my granddad, he would catch all the fish. I never had much luck at catching any. But one day, I threw back, did a good cast, and as I went back, I jerked, and I heard a squeal. As I turned around, it was my dad's lip I had hooked.
Oh.
And as he's screaming for me to let go. But, you know, this story that I'm telling you about my dad's much different meaning than this passage today. You see, I caught with a hook, but they're talking about here the disciples. Jesus talked about catching the heart of men. So in our text, as we read about some of those men who had gone fishing, they would have liked to forget about, that night before they wasn't successful at all. Then Jesus showed up, and then he told them to enter into the deep sea. But today, I'd like to point out a few fundamentals in this passage which speaks about following Christ. See, God speaks to our hearts as he spoke to these fishermen as they were going to enter into the deep sea. Of course, not one of hooking with the wrong thing and coming home unfilled. Jesus wants to enter the deep sea with faith. So let's consider these three fundamentals of this passage with me. Verse 1 through 5. As we enter in with our life, as we enter into the deep sea, we must enter in with faith. But as we enter in with faith, there must be a contact with Jesus. In verse 1, he said, And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. You see, right the chapter before this, Jesus had done some miracles, and he had got a good following. So this was a large amount of people here, and it caused him to enter into a boat to preach to them. There wasn't enough room in the area. So Jesus, as he was among such a great multitude of people, he had got onto this boat so everybody could see him and hear him as he preached. And then he sat down to teach the people. But what I want to look at that's very important here is the cultural context. Jesus used this sea as a place to where he would minister to many and preach to them. The population here was much varied from the other parts of Palestine. We know Capernaum, which his own city was on the shore of Galilee. Jesus used this strategic place to minister and use the opportunity to teach his disciples a lesson. And this lesson is where he met them. He met them where they were in their life, the disciples. So this contact with Jesus began a relationship. You see, spending time with Jesus and the fellowship with the saints is crucial in serving and also growing spiritually. But it was for the disciples, and it's just as important today for us to grow spiritually. Now, as we enter in faith, there must be a confidence in Jesus. You see, the disciples had to believe every command which was about to come to them. They had, like I said, they had been fishing without any luck all night. And here Jesus was challenging them about their faith to go out. Well, the first thing, they were challenged in verse 4. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a drought. The first challenge was to launch. Here the disciples were told to launch into the deep sea of Galilee. Could you imagine with me here their thoughts, their initial thoughts? They're probably tired from fishing. Their nets, they've already washed up their nets from the night before.